Hello, this is the sixth class of the natal astrology course, the last class of the first module, the houses. I've said when I started talking about this course that the first class will be theoretical, will be a discussion on what we can and what we can't do. And here we're going to see what we can and we cannot do when we're looking at each of the houses. I know it's a bit disappointing, but it's better to disappoint you, but give you a reasonable assessment of what we can see, than to trick you into thinking you can see things you cannot. And when I say you cannot, this might sound like an opinion, but it's not an opinion. It comes from the nature of the technique and the nature of the object. For example, I'm reading a small text from a guy named Luca Gaurico, a very famous at his time, although not as famous now, astrologer from Italy. He was a source for almost everyone that came after him. And he was very well respected, very well known, and a very good astrologer. But as it happens to everyone who has ever written natal astrology books, he inserts things that are weird, that cannot be true. For example, in the first chapter of this book, he's talking about the father and the mother in the birth chart. Okay? And he says, when Jupiter and Venus are in a good aspect or in conjunction, and the Sun or Saturn behold each other by trine or sextile, they mean long life to the father, and the opposite, short life, especially if they were afflicted at the angles, and if they were fortunate, they will give him longer life. It seemed very straightforward and very easy, and that's the problem. You look at those four planets here, and you judged the quality and the duration of the life of the father of the native. That's very seducing. It's very tempting. But if you pay attention to how we judge a chart, these things are very difficult, if possible, to determine for the native. It's not an easy thing to look at the native chart and tell if the native will have a happy or an unhappy or an easier or a harder life. This is not easy. And depending on what you mean by happy and unhappy, this is impossible. And to determine if the person will live long or not, you cannot do that from just looking at the chart. This is something we're going to discuss in the course. But the techniques that people talk about them all, the highlight, the narrator, the alcohol coding, they don't work. Not as advertised. You don't just look at them and you make some easy calculations and then you know how many years a person will live. If you cannot do that to the person, you surely cannot do that by looking at 2, 3, or 4 planets to the person's father. It simply makes no sense. And we're going to see other issues, other problems in other houses. But there are things, I'm sorry, that we can do, and some things that look as precise as that, but they are not, they don't hurt the principles. So we're going to have the first class, which may last one session or more than one session. We're going to see the houses 2 to 5. Why 2 to 5? Because the first house we have already seen. When we are talking about the temperament, the manners, the wit, we were seeing we were assessing the first house. Okay, general fortune has something to do with the second house, but there is more to be said about this house. So we're going to look at the houses 2, 3, 4, and 5 here. The next class, we're going to look only at house 6, or it's a house 6 problems, because health problems are not investigated just by looking at the 6th house, but we will get there. And the third class will be on the remaining houses, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Yes, there are more houses here, but the two really important, the one not important in the life, but important in the judgment, the ones that we usually focus more on because they are more sought after by clients, are the 7th and the 10th. And of course, for all these houses and all these classes, we're going to see some examples. Some of them of charts we had already seen. I like this idea of getting one chart, calculated the temperament, and then we go to the wits and manner, and we get the same chart. Not always like that, because some charts give a better example of something, and some charts give better example of other somethings. But then we go to a general assessment of the houses, or in this class we pick someone who has interesting things happening to his or her third house, and so I want to use it as an example of the third house. But first, I calculate the temperament, the manners, the wit. Depending on the person, we take a look at the prenatal eclipse, say one or two other things, a couple of things about the chart, and then we go to the third house. I think that's important, not just to get snapshots of charts, but to look at them with different emphasis. That's why I said we're going to have a lot of examples, because some charts will keep coming back to the classes. So that's the end of the first module. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about the second module, probably just one video for the entire module. I'll discuss that tomorrow. Thank you for listening.